Hello and welcome to GM Tips, the show where my friends and I share with you our thoughts and suggestions on how to game master your role-playing game. I'm your host, Satine Phoenix, co-creator of Maze Arcana and a dungeon master on Fury's Reach. Today I'd like to discuss something I hear a lot about, something that needs addressing. Today's theme is permission. Permission to be a kid, permission to roleplay, permission as a game master to change the rules, permission to reward players and encourage them, permission to throw everything you've read about right out the window to unfold your story. The heart and soul of role-playing is imagining things with your friends. There are tons of tabletop games that you can play that each have their own set of mechanics. Take these mechanics away and guess what? You can still play in each of these worlds. Take away mechanics? I'm not actually saying that. I'm actually talking about the similarities of all these games. Playing Ivan Van Norman's game Dread taught me a lot about what's actually necessary to roleplay. Ivan, the game master, made the decision to not have character sheets so the story would unfold the way he wanted it to. We discussed our character's intentions and backstories with Ivan before the game started, and from there he knew how to navigate us through his world. With the simplicity of making pulls whenever we made story-altering choices, we were able to honestly react to the situation at hand. Having played games with overcomplicated mechanics, 4E, and simplified games like Dread, it's clear that each table's mechanics can change the feel and pacing of the games. You have permission, dear Game Master, to decide which of these mechanics you want to use and which you don't. You have the control. The rules are a guideline, and before you start trying to lynch me, I got this firsthand from my friends Mike Merles and Chris Lindsay over at Dungeons & Dragons. Use what makes sense to you. Toss or develop rules you want. As long as you communicate these changes to your adventurers before the game and everyone knows your rules for the table, you have permission from me, from Mike, and Chris to alter as you see fit for your game. You have permission to take the campaign books and modules and use them as inspiration. You can take the lore and flip it on its head. You can destroy cities and enslave nations, freeze oceans. It's your story. Don't like how racist a town is? You can change them. You are the storyteller, and the players are there to explore your world. This might not go over well for all your players. Some want to play in the world they know and love. There are plenty of gamers who run by the book, and there are tables for them as well. Unless you're a part of organized play groups, you have the freedom to manipulate everything. I could roll on about this, but instead, let's discuss this with one of the original crew members and producer for Geek and Sundry's Twitch channel, Ryan Green.
Hey!
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
We, in our pre-interview, had so much to talk about. Like, it was pretty crazy. I love the history of you and your gaming experience.
Yeah, I kind of rambled on for quite a bit, didn't I?
It was a consensual rambling, so
Yeah,
it was okay.
it
But we landed on permission because what I didn't realize is that in order to create the stories and go to the depths that we go to, we need to have permission, and we don't often give ourselves permission.
Well, and it's interesting because I feel that people feel so limited by the information that they're given from books and modules and the DM's Guild. There's so much stuff and content that's there that people look at it and say, this is how it's done. And that's not true.
No.
Those are guidelines. Those are suggestions. Now, it's good for players and DMs to share a general consensus of how rules work. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what you're allowed to do, both as the player and as the DM, that's a completely different story to tell altogether.
Yeah.
So for me, whenever I begin to develop an idea, it starts as just that idea, just that simple little molecule of something, and I write a story around that, and I go, and I say, well, what rules work for this? And 5th edition is such a friendly storytelling system because the rules are so simple.
But it's important to know all the rules and read them and then manipulate them.
After you understand it, and we all have our general mechanics. You have, the D20, you have your damage, you have, the algorithm that you have to perform, which is generally only 3 or 4 numbers, and that's it. And as long as you have that, then you can start playing with the permission of what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, what you allow your players to do and you don't allow them to do.
Yeah.
And so for me, one of the things that I love to do is allow my players to tell me something. And so I structure my thought process whenever we're going, say, into an encounter. I structure my thought process into 3 things. First is the narrative. The first priority is narrative. Then there's the mechanics, and then there's the storytelling, the actual narrative that I want to have. So I have a general consensus as to what it is that I'm trying to achieve with my story. But if the role player, if the player actually tells me something that, oh, they want to run up and they want to attack a bandit, and they're approaching, they start describing the wind on their face and the going through the leaves and such, and then sneaking up behind them and just a soft breath against the back of their neck to make their hairs rise and then slit their throat. I'm like, fuck, yes, let's do this. Let's do it. So I'll have them roll, and if it's high enough, they just get to kill it. HP doesn't matter, AC doesn't matter. I'm like, I want you to, the only AC that's there is how much you gave me, is how much the difficulty is just, it gets lowered with the more role play and the more narrative you give me.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I'm just the narrator for your story. You as the player, I'm just here to tell it. But if you start writing your own fluid dimensions to it, I'm all about it.
Well, what happens when you have another player who sees that and is like, that's not fair. They have X amount of hit points and all this. What happens when they start debating with you?
If they just slit the bandit's throat and you don't like it, that happened in 2 seconds. What do you want to do? You tell me how you stop that from happening. Tell me what the problem is that your character sees with that, because you're getting out of character emotions and you're getting in character emotions. You just told me you're out of character. What's your in character? And then I want them to start engaging and start giving me that role play and that narrative, because it's not always about min-maxing. It's not always about the strict and stern mechanics of something. DMs rewrite stuff all the time. It might just be a simple spell or a little thing here and there, but to completely forego combat mechanics in favor of storytelling, that's what D&D is about. It's about storytelling, not about number crunching. Well, at least not to me.
So if you have a lot of players who are doing this super heavy descriptive role playing, do you manipulate the mechanics to the point where they all just kind of succeed because of the heavy role play?
Well, that's where the next step comes in, which is the mechanics and the storytelling itself, because I might intend for a villain to escape. Now, if they do things really well and they start rolling those nat 20s and they start getting there, then I might have to change my story quite a bit. But mechanics do have to limit what the players do just a little bit, because otherwise, if I let them do everything that they wanted at all times, it gets out of control. So that's where the mechanics do come in, and I have to say, well, you do have to, if you get hit, you still have to perform a concentration check.
Yeah.
Because I like that. And that does make sense. You can't stay focused on something after getting bludgeoned in the side of the head.
Yes, exactly.
And so that's why that rule does exist. But, again, if a rogue is going up and slitting a throat, I'm like, that's something that you do as a rogue. Like, that's a function that you have. If a wizard did that, different story.
Oh, interesting.
So unless the character is dynamic and their backstory and their history says that they have this criminal origin, that they the skullduggery that they try and perform, then that's a little bit different, but that's because you've written me a narrative. You've given me a reason why your character acts that way and performs that way as a wizard, which it seems out of character for the wizard class, but in character for you.
So it's like honest role-playing will encourage you to reward the players.
Absolutely. Constantly. And I feel that that's the greatest thing that you can do for the players, is reward them for role-playing and reward them for telling their story. Again, I'm just narrating at this point.
Yeah.
Because I want them to come up with their dialogue, I want them to come up with their monologue. And furthermore, whenever you're looking or you're listening to the story, I want everyone at the table to stop and just listen and just think for a moment. And not try and just go over each other, this hand me the Doritos. And just going. And I just want them to be able to listen to what they're saying, because you're going to get so much more out of that.
Because it's about reacting. That's the honest role playing, is reacting to the other person. And there's so many people at the table. Say there's 4 players and a game master. Everybody's reacting to one another. So listen to what the other players are doing, is what you're saying. Listen to the game master and then kind of feed off of that.
Yeah, and because that's going to establish the type of things that might influence your character and the player. Again, that the in character and the out of character dynamic, which are 2 very different things. And that's something that I feel is really important for the role play itself, is understanding those 2 elements. Because I might be angry that so-and-so just kind of bent the rules in the favor and the DM allowed it. But then and I have to say, well, what would my character do? What would my character do in this moment? If they can bend the rules, I bet I can too, but how far can I go to the limitations of my character.
So I think that a lot of people are afraid of letting go of the numbers.
I agree. I agree.
So how do you So you gave one example on how to overcome that. Do you have any other examples?
I try and tell everyone yes and. No matter what, yes and. If we're having conversation in a forest and one of the characters says a beehive is nearby, suddenly a beehive is nearby. And I'm like, sure, why not? It really has no influence over the story yet, but it's there. And at the same time, if, like we were talking about the bandit going up, or the bandit standing there and someone slitting their throat. Now, a dagger has a certain number that's associated with it. But at that point, a dagger still deals a lot of damage to a jugular.
Yeah.
I don't care what a number says at that point. If you're telling me specifically what you're doing, then that allows the numbers to just not exist. But if you say, I'm going to go up and attack the bandit, then the numbers will exist.
Okay, so what if you have you have your dagger at the jugular, and you're like, this is what I want to do, heavy role play. I roll a 1.
You still get to more or less do what you were doing, but as you were approaching, you misstepped. And you stepped on that twig, getting the attention of the other ones. You end up getting the dagger into the side there because of the sudden attention that was drawn to you. You still hit the guy and you still scratch the throat.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily deal all the damage that you were intending, and now as a rogue that was standing there, all the attention on you is exactly what you don't want to have happen.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take away
Yeah.
from what you did, from the intent of your action and the intent of your role play. I don't want to take that away. But I am going to punish you because the mechanics told me to.
Interesting. So as a game master, you are the one who can guide how far the role playing can go.
Absolutely.
Based on the mechanics that you're saying.
Based on the mechanics. But I always respect the role play first. And then if the mechanics say that I can't respect the role play, a die roll says I can't respect it, I'm like, well, we'll see.
I'm fudging it here and there.
Yeah, fudging it here
and
and
that's the thing is you're the game master. You want to give the players a certain amount of openness, but you kind of have to pull back a little bit sometimes.
Just here and there. And Resurrection is actually another great example. A character dies and it's like, well, I'm a cleric. I'm like, yes, but are you trained enough? Are you powerful enough? Can you actually do it? Do you have access to that spell? Do you still have the spell slot available? Or did you drain all of that radiance within you one day, for that day? And, so the role play might be really rich, but I'm like, what's better? The fact that you can't do something.
Yes.
Role play that you can't do it. You place your hands on their chest. You feel the magic begin to surge through you, that radiant energy begin to surge through you, and then slowly peter out. You feel exhausted and you begin to collapse.
Oh, that sucks.
Because that spell slot's not there, but I'm like, I'm now going to let you know that you are fatigued from this and you are actually suffering exhaustion because you are overstressing your body to do it.
And then the players need to know that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to fail. And it's okay to have flaws and to be below a certain amount of hit points and all that.
I mean, that's how life goes. And
Exactly.
and I want to bring as many real life rules that we have and restrictions that we have in our reality to the game without it making it feel like real life and still feel like a game.
Yeah. Are you ready for the last 3 questions?
I hope so.
What is your pre-game house rule?
Definitely yes and. Definitely yes and. I want people to feel comfortable, and I want them, and then and that they are able to make the story, such as the beehive or the bandit, and I want them to know that it's okay to not know everything, as long as you're trying.
Yes.
As long as you don't need to know all the rules. You don't need a number crunch. You don't need to know exactly the right path to take to level up in the most efficient way. Do what matters to you. This is your story. This is your character. Just go. Do with it. And everyone else is going to accept it around you because they don't know better either.
Yeah, exactly. What is your favorite GM moment?
I'm so lucky because it is a thing that I get to experience again and again with every campaign, and it's character creation.
Oh.
And because I can sit here and create characters all day. That's what a DM does. They create hundreds and hundreds of characters. But especially with new players, if I say, we're going to create a character in a fantasy environment. Right now, you already thought of something. I don't know what that is. And it's the first time that I get to interact with my player where we get to share our imagination. And it comes together and we think of the exact same thing. Eventually we get to it, but we get the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And if you say bard, I'm like, great, you already know who your mother and father are. You already know if they're dead or alive. You know if you were raised by wolves or bears. You know all of this. I don't. Tell me. So it's a questionnaire and an inquiry where I just start going in and we're writing a story together in that moment. But it's our story. No one else in the room knows it. Yeah. And so to see a story written in seconds, in moments, that's my favorite DM experience, because then I look at everything that you created in that very moment, I say, well, now how am I going to fit this in? And how am I going to make sure to best represent your story in this game? Because it's about you, not me.
Beautiful. GM tip for the audience.
Okay, so I mentioned a little bit before, but it's listening. Stopping and listening. Whenever the DM is speaking, you are listening. Whenever a player is speaking, you are listening. Because there is so much to get out of those small moments, little nuances. And it's not just listening, it's watching. Because if I say, sure, we can go there, that's one thing. But sure, we can go there. The influx in my voice, the expression on my face, the little bits of acting that you get from that can have an entirely different meaning.
Exactly.
Just because you weren't talking to your friend because it wasn't your turn.
Yes.
And it's stopping, listening, and paying attention. Like, those are so important to be able to do.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching GM Tips here on Geek and Sundry. A big thank you to Ryan for hanging out with us today.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Where can we find you on the internet?
So for Twitter, you can find me at Hydrosnail, and my Twitch is twitch.tv/Hydrosnail_Ryan Green.
Very long, very nice. I'm Satine Phoenix, as always, at Satine Phoenix, and you can ask me questions to explore on this show at #AskSatine. You can find me Sundays at noon on Orphan Echo on twitch.tv/MazeArcana, and Tuesday evenings Dungeon Mastering on twitch.tv/DND. And if you haven't seen Sagas of Sundry Dread, check it out on projectalpha.com. Ryan, will you GM us out of here?
I'd love to. So, you find yourself on your knees, hands bound behind your back. You're in some form of stone room, possibly a cathedral. Moonlight shining through the stained glass. Looking to your left, you see that stained glass, the moonlight shimmering in the dust. On it, you see a falling star? No, an angel of some sort, crashing before you. A man steps out of the shadows, his face obscured with darkness. He spreads his long black wings that are broken and battered from combat. Feathers begin to fall from them, and from the tips you can see that they have been burned and charred with battle, but they are stained with blood. Looking at you. Hello, Bishop. You look at me with such surprise. You have seen me before. Yes. You see his focus slowly glance back up to that stained glass window, then back at you. He can't hear you, you know. Hell. Hell is not a place of fire and brimstone. You feel your body begin to heat and swell. No. Hell is not a place of pain as you get an image of hooks flying toward you, or agony. You feel the hooks descend into your flesh. No. Hell is a place where God doesn't listen. Placing his hand upon your head, you disintegrate into ash.